Everything changed in a matter of seconds. But you didn't see it happen on the field. The fate of an NFL franchise, it rarely pivots under the bright stadium lights of a Sunday afternoon. No, it pivots in the quiet, unforgiving shadows of the offseason. We're talking about those closed-door front office meetings, those microscopic schematic adjustments, and high-stakes gambles that test the very soul of an organization. Well, welcome to the unseen chess match. Today we're diving deep into the absolute tremors of the 2026 NFL offseason, because the decisions being made right now, today, they are the ones that will trigger absolute earthquakes come September. Let's get right into it.
You never know what can happen. Just let that hang in the air for a second. Now, you might be thinking this is just a cliche soundbite, a player at a casual sports panel in Cleveland throwing out a generic answer. But it's not. This is a ghost, and it's haunting an entire franchise right now. These words, spoken by former Browns running back Nick Chubb as training camps loom, they carry the heavy and inescapable weight of a city's regret. The stakes behind this single sentence, honestly, they're cinematic. They represent a fractured relationship, a completely brutal business, and a ticking clock on an unresolved legacy. But before we break down exactly why these words might completely alter the balance of power in the AFC, look, if you want to actually survive the brutal NFL offseason, you have to look way beyond the massive, shiny headlines. In this explainer, we're breaking down the unseen moves that will define the entire year. We're going to look under the hood of three distinct franchises, pulling apart the granular details that everybody else just ignores. If you want to understand the true beating anatomy of the league, your channel is NFL Nexus. So do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and sound off in the comments right now with your thoughts. And hey, if you want to support the channel even further and help us keep doing these deep dives, become a channel member today. We are looking at the foundational shifts that dictate who ultimately lifts the Lombardi and who just gets left in the dust. Act 1. The prodigal son returns? Okay, the atmosphere in Cleveland right now, it's a tense, highly emotional standoff. When General Manager Andrew Berry made the mathematically calculated but deeply difficult decision to let Nick Chubb walk in 2025, you have to understand it wasn't just a roster transaction. It was a wound to the franchise. A massive fan favorite, a quintessential teammate, just severed from the locker room. And the bleeding from that wound, it is perfectly, terrifyingly represented by this number, 97.0. I really want you to hyper-focus on this microscopic detail, because this number is absolutely terrifying if you are the Cleveland Browns. 97.0 rushing yards per game in 2025. That was the sixth lowest output in the entire National Football League. Now, this isn't just a bad statistic on a spreadsheet, right? This is a tectonic failure for a team that is built strictly on physical dominance. Think about it. When you cannot run the football, when you literally cannot impose your will and control the clock in the freezing, bitter conditions of the AFC North, your entire structural identity just collapses. The domino effect is massive. Defenses completely stop respecting the box. The safeties start playing high. The edge rushers, they just pin their ears back and tee off on your quarterback because they don't have to worry about getting punched in the mouth by the run game. This abysmal 97.0 yards threatens their very survival going forward. So while Cleveland was out there suffocating on the ground, let's look over at Nick Chubb's 2025 survival campaign down in Houston. After being hobbled by major, truly catastrophic injuries in his final 2 seasons with the Browns, Chubb went to the Texans and literally fought for his football life. 15 games played, 122 carries, 506 yards, 3 touchdowns. The real story beneath these stats? It's a 30-year-old veteran grinding out every single hard-earned yard with a battered body. It was a bounce-back season built on sheer, undeniable willpower. Because he proved he could still endure the physical toll of the NFL, which is huge. He proved he could absorb that grueling, week-to-week punishment that literally destroys younger men. Every single one of those 506 yards was earned right down in the dirty areas of the trenches. It's a testament to a player who just simply refuses to let the league dictate his expiration date. Which brings us right to the agonizing fallout. When you talk about Cleveland's rushing royalty, it's a very short, very elite list. 1, Jim Brown. 2, Leroy Kelly. 3, Nick Chubb. The Browns drafted him 35th overall back in 2018, and by the time he walked out that building in 2025, he was 3rd on their all-time list. Andrew Berry let a living legend leave the building. And the consequence of that move? Well, the Browns now desperately need him back. And I don't mean just for his on-field talent, to fix that crippling 97-yard deficit we talked about, but for his mind, his leadership. Rookie Quinshon Judkins, look, he impressed in his first campaign. He showed dynamic bursts of speed, but he is standing on the edge of a cliff right now. He desperately, desperately needs the mentorship of a veteran who actually understands the massive, crushing burden of carrying the hopes of Cleveland on his shoulders. A reunion here, It's not just an option or nice feel-good story. It feels like an absolute undeniable necessity for their survival. Act 2. Houston's lethal aerial arsenal. Now while the Browns are busy grappling with their past, the Houston Texans are quietly in the lab building a machine designed to completely suffocate defenses. We are framing their offseason not simply as an improvement, but as the methodical, terrifying construction of a silent, lethal juggernaut. And it starts right here with their unseen receivers. While Nico Collins rightfully commands the massive spotlight and the constant double coverage, minicamp actually revealed a completely different story unfolding behind the scenes. Veteran Justin Watson went out of his way to praise a trio of young, rapidly evolving weapons that are about to change the math for this team. You've got Jaden Higgins, who is developing into an absolute dominant vertical threat on the outside. He's using his big frame and this incredible stride to just command safety attention over the top. Then there's Jalen Noel, who is stepping directly into the slot. He's replacing Christian Kirk's crucial inside snaps with youth, explosive speed, and elite route-running precision. And then you have rookie Lewis Bond, highly productive in college, and he's proving to be an incredibly reliable safety valve in the short game, super dangerous after the catch. You see how this fundamentally alters the geometry of the entire offense? If Higgins and Noel hit their stride, forcing defenses to stretch both vertically and horizontally, CJ Stroud's ceiling becomes utterly limitless.
The jumbo schematic pivot.
Okay, so the wide receivers might be the ones making the highlight reels, right? But the tight ends, they are about to dictate the violence on the field. I want to darken the tone here a bit as we dive painfully deep into the granular structural changes that offensive coordinator Nick Caley is deploying. Look at this stark, terrifying contrast. In 2025, the Houston Texans used 12 personnel. For those who don't know, that's 1 running back and 2 tight ends on the field on just 5.84% of their plays. The NFL average, 22.3%. Houston ranked 31st in the entire league. Now really think about the severe consequence of that microscopic number. That is a near fatal flaw in modern NFL play calling, because when you don't use 2 tight ends consistently, you completely lose your structural unpredictability. Defenses suddenly don't have to respect heavy downhill run blocking. They can just comfortably tee off with smaller, faster sub-packages. They deploy extra nickel and dime defensive backs, knowing for a fact that you completely lack the muscle to punish them for it. The Texans were essentially playing with one arm tied behind their back, completely unable to dictate terms in the brutal, physical trenches of the line of scrimmage. And the math actually gets worse. Let's look at their 13 personnel usage. That's 1 running back and a massive 3 tight ends on the field. Houston was sitting at a microscopic 1.47%, ranking 25th in the league against an NFL average of 5.34%. We are dissecting a massive, undeniable mathematical deficit right here. Because by failing to put multiple heavy bodies on the field, they actively restricted their own playbook. They couldn't disguise their intentions from opposing defensive coordinators. It was way too obvious. If they came out light, they were throwing. If they came out heavy, they were running. Every single time they stepped onto the field, the defense had a massive schematic advantage before the ball was even snapped. And this structural limitation, it placed an artificial, deeply frustrating ceiling on what an elite processor like CJ Stroud could actually accomplish pre-snap. But here's the thing, the front office recognized the bleeding. Enter the jumbo arsenal. To their existing tight end room of Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover, and Brevin Jordan, Houston went out and intentionally added veteran blocking specialist Foster Moreau in free agency. And they didn't stop there. They doubled down by drafting Marlon Klein in the 2nd round. We absolutely must painstakingly break down what this actually means. By adding a proven road grader like Moreau and a high-investment draft pick like Klein, they aren't just adding camp bodies to the roster. No, they are opening, violent, scheme-shifting gaps for running backs David Montgomery and Woody Marks. They're ensuring that the abysmal 5.84% usage rate from last year just vanishes forever. They're forcing defenses to take those fast defensive backs off the field and replace them with slower, heavier linebackers, which instantly creates devastating mismatches in the passing game. Listen very closely to what offensive coordinator Nick Caley said. We want to be multiple. We want to have balance, 11, 12s, 13s, 20, etc. We're in the jumbo world a lot. Let that complete obsession with versatility echo as a massive warning to the rest of the league. You have to remember, Caley learned his craft in the Los Angeles Rams system. He knows exactly how to manipulate defensive rules. He knows that when you can seamlessly shift from a heavy jumbo run look into a lethal play-action pass without changing a single player on the field, the defense physically and mentally breaks. Houston isn't just fixing a flaw anymore, they are weaponizing it to completely dominate. Act 3.
Pittsburgh's dangerous draft gamble. Now, while Cleveland looks back to the past and Houston calculates the math for the future, the Pittsburgh Steelers are entering what might be the highest stakes poker game of the offseason. We need to methodically trace the totally chaotic timeline of the Brendan Sorsby saga. Months ago, this guy was a star quarterback at Indiana and Cincinnati, flashing high-ceiling, true franchise-altering talent. Then, weeks ago, the headlines turned incredibly dark as massive off-the-field gambling issues surfaced. Just days ago, in a sudden, wild twist, a lawsuit against the NCAA that made him ineligible for 2026 college football was suddenly withdrawn. And now, he has officially declared for the NFL supplemental draft. The sense of dread here is totally palpable, because this is a definitive first-round talent wrapped in an explosive, highly unpredictable level of controversy. And the Steelers, a team that is desperate for a long-term answer at the most important position in sports, are heavily linked to him. But here's a million-dollar question. How do you even begin to vet a player who is surrounded by this much absolute chaos? Dramatically, reporter Ray Fittipaldo revealed an incredibly unsettling detail about General Manager Omar Khan's operation in Pittsburgh. They literally have law enforcement on staff. The Steelers utilize paid law enforcement professionals to dig incredibly deep into the darkest, most hidden corners of a player's personal background. This is not your standard background check where a scout just calls up a college coach and asks a few questions. No, this is a forensic excavation of Sorsby's gambling issues. They are utilizing trained investigators to track financial ties, comb through digital footprints, and map out personal associations. They have the resources to find out exactly how deep the rot goes before they forfeit critical future draft capital on a multi-million-dollar gamble. And look at the absolute powder keg they'd be dropping this kid into. This is Mike McCarthy's exceptionally high-stakes quarterback room. You are trying to balance a demanding four-time MVP in Aaron Rodgers alongside Will Howard. Plus, you have the intense ground-up mechanics rebuild of Drew Aller. Oh, and not to mention, Mason Rudolph is still lingering in the mix too. The volatility of this room right now is already completely off the charts. The coaching staff is desperately trying to quickly retool under McCarthy to end a near 10-year playoff win drought. So introducing a deeply chaotic element like Sorsby into an environment that requires absolute maximum focus and minimal distraction, that could be absolutely catastrophic. Which leads us to the ultimate, inescapable question. Is a supplemental draft pick worth a franchise's soul? Which leads us to the ultimate, inescapable question. Is a supplemental draft pick worth a franchise's soul? Really think about the legendary blue-collar culture that the Pittsburgh Steelers have meticulously built over decades. Think about the singular, unrelenting focus required to just win a single game in the National Football League. When you bring in a player whose off-field issues were so severe they literally required private law enforcement to investigate, you risk infecting the entire locker room. You risk tearing down the very foundation McCarthy is desperately trying to stabilize right now. Yes, the talent on the tape is undeniable, but the ultimate cost? It might just be the very identity of the team itself. The unforgiving NFL reality. What we've explored today, these aren't just isolated news blurbs buried in the back pages of some websites. They are the true foundational, structural pillars of the 2026 season. Think about what we covered. A prodigal running back whose absence caused a tectonic, franchise-altering collapse in Cleveland. A microscopic schematic shift in Houston that is fundamentally turning a mathematical flaw into a devastating jumbo-sized weapon. And a dangerous, high-stakes draft gamble in Pittsburgh that tests the absolute cultural limits of a desperate front office. It is an unseen chess match happening right now behind closed doors, and every single move carries a terrifying consequence. So I leave you with this final thought. When the dust finally settles on the 2026 offseason, which of these unseen chess moves will trigger a devastating regular season earthquake? The answers are being written right now, in the shadows. As Nick Chubb said, you never know what can happen, but you can always be prepared. That's all for today's Explainer. Keep your eyes open, and we'll see you next time on NFL Nexus.